Hi, so I got married a couple of days ago, but unfortunately, my crazy mother-in-law decided to try and ruin stuff for us by bringing along my husband's ex. Now obviously, things are not going well for her, but she wants my help to set the record straight with her son and husband. And she's been trying to guilt trip me into helping her out, but I'm not sure if I want to do that. For context, my husband, Nick, 27M, and I, 27F, have been together for the past 3 years. My mother-in-law, Tina, has never liked me. Actually, never liked me is an understatement. She hated my guts right from the first day that she met me. She wanted Nick to get married to his ex, the one who ended up cheating on him, Vicky, 27F. Nick and Vicky had been together for a really long time. They have known each other since they were kids because their parents are friends. They went to the same schools all their lives, started dating in high school, and stayed together until their freshman year in college. They had only parted ways in college, which is when they took a break from their relationship because they didn't want to do the long distance thing. Nick and I met in college and we became friends quite quickly, but that's all that we were, friends. I had a thing for him, but I never told him because I knew about him and Vicky, and even though they were on a break, I didn't want to make a move and try to ruin whatever they had. And from what I know, he never hooked up with any other girls when he was in college either. For him, the only reason he and Vicky had taken a break was because of the long distance situation, because they wanted to explore other options. So in his case, it was always pretty clear that he wanted to be with Vicky. After we graduated, he and I stayed friends, but it was always platonic. And then, Vicky came back here as well, so their break was over and they were back together. For about a year after graduation, Nick and I hardly kept in touch because he was busy with work, and Vicky and I were also busy with my job. So we didn't get to speak to each other much, but then, one day I just ran into him at some concert that I was attending with a couple of friends. We got to talking, and of course, since I didn't see Vicky with him, I asked him about it and he told me that they had broken up just a week before the concert and he was here with his friends to cheer himself up. He told me that Vicky had apparently been cheating on him with some guy she had met in college, ever since she had come back here, so they were done now. Apparently, they had started hooking up when she was staying out of state, and after she had come back here, she had planned on breaking up with Nick, but never really got around to actually doing it. So she had just been texting him behind his back, telling him that she would break up with Nick eventually, and about a week before that concert, he had found those texts on her phone. They ended up having a huge fight and he moved out that day. Obviously, I felt bad for him because we had been good friends and I knew how serious he had been about his relationship with Vicky. Their families even wanted them to get married and he wanted that as well. So it must have been a huge shock for him, and we ended up spending the entire concert together, which annoyed our respective friend groups, but we didn't care. That's how we started becoming friends again, and almost 1 year after that, he asked me out on a date. That is how our relationship started, and in the beginning, both of us were quite skeptical, so we decided to take it slow. But, thankfully, things worked out, and within 6 months of our relationship, he had introduced me to his parents. Unfortunately, while his dad was quite okay with me, Tina hated me. Because according to her, I was the one who had ruined her son's relationship with his soulmate. I don't understand where she got that from, because she knew that Vicky and Nick had been broken up for almost a year before we even went out on our first date. Granted, she didn't know about the cheating, because after the breakup, Vicky had practically begged Nick not to tell anyone about the fact that she had cheated because that would create a lot of drama and uproar in her family. Their families had been friends for generations since their grandfathers had been business partners, which meant that their families were equally invested in their relationship, and she was right about the kind of trouble it would create for her if anyone found out that she had been cheating on Nick, especially since their mothers wanted them married more than anything else. So Nick had kept that a secret and never told his mother about it, but he shouldn't have had to. The fact that Nick and Vicky had broken up should have been good enough for Tina. If it was good enough for his dad, I couldn't understand why she needed to go out of her way to hate on me. Anyway, she was always very cold towards me and acted as if I was beneath her. Nick always stood up for me to the best of his abilities, but that didn't seem to affect her at all. After one point, we just accepted that she was not going to change and was always going to blame me for their breakup, even though I had nothing to do with it. So I started giving her the cold shoulder as well, and that's how we have dealt with the situation for the past 3 years. Then, Nick and I got engaged 8 months back, and last week, we had our wedding. All throughout these 8 months, Tina has done nothing but sulk about it, but nobody cares. And I guess that's why she decided that she had to pull off this crazy stunt at our wedding just for attention. And also to put me down, I guess, since that's one of her favorite hobbies. Anyway, on the day of the wedding, during the reception, Tina walked up to us and told us that she had a very special surprise for both of us. And then, she went out and came back holding hands with Vicky. All of us were shocked because obviously, Vicky hadn't been invited to the wedding. And a lot of people knew who she was, so everyone looked surprised as well when she walked in with Tina. I was literally frozen in place because I hadn't been expecting this, and I could see that Nick was also very upset. As soon as they were close enough to be out of earshot for everyone else, Nick asked his mom what she was playing at, and Tina very casually told him that she had just invited Vicky so I could learn what an ideal wife should be like. The only problem was that Tina had said it at the top of her voice so that everyone standing around us heard about it. From her face, I could see that Vicky was also pretty impressed with herself and she was enjoying this whole thing thoroughly. And that's when Nick completely lost it. He started screaming at his mother, and he told her that the reason she had been dumped was because she was a cheater. So if her idea of an ideal wife meant a liar and a cheater, then by all means, Vicky was more than perfect. Obviously Tina had no idea about any of that, so she was quite surprised. And she started fumbling with her words after that, but Nick didn't care. He just grabbed her by the arm and started walking her outside. He was furious, and there was no stopping him, so nobody even tried. Vicky also left without a word, and then, after about 15 minutes, Nick was back with me. My father-in-law was equally upset and both of them apologized to all the guests for the drama, but, thankfully, nobody seemed to mind. They knew that this was not our fault, so we just resumed the celebrations and treated that little incident with Tina and Vicky as just a tiny little blip on an otherwise perfect wedding day. Later on, I even tried to bring it up with Nick, but he told me that we didn't have to discuss it because he had decided that he was going to cut his mother out of his life permanently. He had already put up with a lot of her nonsense because he didn't want to create unnecessary drama with her, since that would also inevitably affect his relationship with his father because his parents stay under the same roof and it would be really weird and awkward for him to visit his dad while fighting with his mom. That's why we had avoided any sort of confrontation for so long, but after this, he couldn't tolerate his mother's behavior and let her constantly disrespect me. We planned on speaking to his father the next day and letting him know that we would be reducing our visits significantly because now that we were planning on cutting Tina out of our lives, it would be difficult for us to come to see him as well. It would be difficult, but we had to make that decision for our own good. However, the next morning, when we called him to inform him of our decision, he told us that we didn't have to worry about that, and we could visit him as freely as we wanted to because he had decided to ask Tina to vacate the house. He said that he knew for a fact that the biggest reason we hadn't cut her out of our lives already was because they stayed together and it would get awkward for us. But after the way she had embarrassed everyone at our wedding, he couldn't let this go on anymore. He had to take a stand for himself, his son, and even his daughter-in-law, and he was doing this by asking his wife to leave. We were shocked that this was happening because they had been married for more than 3 decades and he obviously loved his wife. That's why he had put up with this kind of behavior for a really long time now. But he said that, even though he loved her, it couldn't excuse everything that she did. And at some point, he had to think about what was right and wrong instead of just constantly letting everything go. He said that he was not going to file for a divorce, but they were definitely going to be living separately from now onwards, at least until she apologized to all of us. So we were really glad that he had decided to make this decision, and for those 2 days, everything was fine. But then, on the 3rd day after our wedding, my mother-in-law reached out to me through a burner phone. Since I had blocked her, she couldn't contact me earlier and it took her to find a way to do so. She texted me saying that she was sorry about everything that had happened so far and that she had just misunderstood the situation, which is why she had been so horrible to me. Now that a lot of things about Vicky have finally come to light, she has a very different opinion on the situation, and she just needs one more chance from everyone. And for that, she needs my help because she needs me to forgive her and convince everyone to give her another chance. I don't understand why she expects me to do that, so at first, I just blocked the number that she had contacted me from and pretended like nothing had happened. But then, I guess she got her friends to text me, and since then, she's been trying to get me to help her out. She keeps using their phones to get in touch with me and has been telling me that because of what happened at the wedding, not only is my husband not speaking to her, even her own husband has kicked her out of the house and she can't just let go of 30 years of marriage like that. She told me that she really and genuinely is sorry about everything, but it's not like she can take anything back. She can count on me to forgive her and be the bigger person. She has also explained the whole thing to Vicky. She said that after Vicky had come back from college, she had noticed that things were kind of off between her and Nick, but she had assumed that it must have been Nick's fault and not her because whenever he would go back home for the holidays, while he was in college, he would talk a lot about his friends, particularly about me. And then, when he brought me home to meet his parents and introduced me as his girlfriend just a year after he had broken up with Vicky, she just assumed that I was the reason he and Vicky had broken up. Obviously back then, she had no idea that Vicky was the one who had cheated, and I had only been friends with her son, nothing more. But in her head, She had convinced herself that I was the reason things with Vicky hadn't worked out for Nick, and that's why she started hating me, because their breakup had come as a huge shock to both families. Their parents were so disappointed that now, they're not even on good terms anymore. So eventually, she started blaming me for all of that, and that's why she was so horrible to me. I knew all these things already, she was just finally acknowledging it all herself. Unfortunately, instead of making it better, it made me even more upset, because even if I assumed for a second that she was correct about everything, that I was the reason Vicky and Nick had broken up, and Vicky had never cheated, it would still not make sense for her to hate me. Her son would be an equal part of the situation, and yet, instead of blaming him, she was getting mad at me over some situation she had made up for herself and convinced herself that it was real. The truth was that she just needed an excuse to hate me. Anyway, this is why I haven't been responding to her for the past couple of days. I had spoken to my husband about it as well, and Nick said that I could do whatever I wanted to. I was under pressure to make sure that she was reunited with her family. That was her own responsibility, and after all, she had been the one to ruin all her relationships so far. She could handle this on her own. Even the expectation that I'm going to help her out after everything that she has done, it's ridiculous. At least that's what Nick had to say about this, but my parents don't agree. I spoke to them about it 2 days ago and they were visibly uncomfortable, so I told them to go ahead and tell me whatever they wanted to say. They ended up saying that they didn't think that it was entirely my mother-in-law's fault, since Tina was apparently just acting out of emotions only because she didn't know the whole truth. Obviously, I immediately got mad at them, but then, they made me calm down, and then they asked me to think about it from her perspective as well. They made it very clear that they were not trying to justify anything that she did. It was obviously still really wrong, but she's from a different generation and she's a very different person. So naturally, she dealt with things in a way that Nick and I probably wouldn't have had. They explained to me that in her head, it seemed as if I was the one who ruined Nick and Vicky's relationship, and along with that, I also ended up ruining a lifelong friendship that they had had with Vicky's parents. Her husband had a different way of dealing with it, but her way of dealing with it was to start treating me badly. Of course, what she did at the wedding was out of line, but in her defense, she had no idea that Vicky had cheated. And they told me that I didn't have to forgive her, neither did I have to do as she asked of me, but they just wanted me to think about it. So that's what I've been doing. I've been thinking about it a lot and now I'm very confused. Because it is true that Tina had no idea that Vicky had cheated on her son, and that's what had ruined their relationship. Also, I didn't know that Nick used to talk about me at home when he was in college and on a break with Vicky. That way, I guess I can see why Tina would think that I had created a rift between the two of them for my own good or something. But that wasn't the whole truth, and I still feel like regardless of what the truth was, she should have treated me with respect when Nick started dating me. I'm in two minds right now about what to do, and my biggest dilemma is whether she should have been told about Vicky's cheating right from the beginning or not, because I guess that would have saved everyone a lot of trouble. So are my husband and I the Oz for never telling his mother that his previous relationship hadn't worked out because his ex had cheated on him? Edit, for those asking, I really don't know why Vicky showed up. I don't know what she was expecting. If she had actually believed that she was going to get away with this, she was obviously mistaken. And yes, so far, she knew that we had kept her secret about her cheating on Nick. I knew the truth, and even I hadn't said anything about it to my in-laws, just because I knew that that's not what Nick wanted and I did not want to betray his trust. Even though I knew that somewhere deep down, it might have made things better for me. She was literally indebted to us and she decided to try and screw us over. I have spoken to Nick about it and he told me that this was completely out of the blue. He was just as blindsided as I had been, because after he started dating me, he has had no contact with Vicky. In fact, she's been blocked everywhere. His guess is that she probably just showed up for the drama. There was no other motive. He knows that she hates him because even though he had kept her cheating a secret from his parents, he hadn't bothered to do that for his friends. And since they had a huge group of friends that both of them used to be a part of in high school, pretty much lost all of them because nobody wanted to speak to her after they found out that she had been cheating on Nick, and that's what had led to their breakup. Instead of acknowledging the fact that she had screwed it up for herself, she held him responsible and tried her best to badmouth him all the time to anyone who would listen. So he knows that she never liked him after the breakup, but this was going way too far. We don't know if her parents have found out the real reason why Vicky and Nick ended up ending the relationship yet, even though he had made the announcement at the wedding that she was the one who had cheated on him. Her parents had not been invited to the wedding because, like I said, after the breakup, both the families had been pretty shocked about it and had sort of just drifted apart. So naturally, they had not been invited. But other common family friends had been present, so they might as well have passed on that information. Anyway, that's really none of our business. That's for Vicky to deal with. I guess she thought that since her parents were not invited, she was going to get away scot-free. But I really hope that her parents get to find out, and even though it's been years, I really hope that she faces some consequences at least. Update 1. Thanks for the comments, guys. So I have spoken to Nick about whatever I was thinking. I told him that even though he had advised me against it, I couldn't help but feel guilty. The best way that I thought that I could deal with this was just by talking to him, because that's what I usually do whenever I have a problem. I told him that I honestly believed that things might have turned out if we had been upfront with his mother right from the beginning, and told her why exactly Nick and Vicky had broken up, that Vicky had cheated on him, and then maybe her feelings would have been different from the beginning itself. I even showed him her messages, which I hadn't done earlier because I didn't want to make a big deal out of it, and I knew that he was hurting after cutting Tina out of his life, so I didn't want to add salt to the wound. We discussed things for a while, and he told me that while everything that I was saying was valid, and even the fact that I was feeling guilty about this was valid, he still did not believe that we owed her anything. Not even the truth. He said that it should have been enough for her when he told her that he had broken up with Vicky and he was done with her. Whatever the reasons were, that was really none of her business. It was her problem that she was so invested in his relationship that she couldn't accept it when it was finally over. That was his problem to deal with. She was the one who had to work on that, but she didn't. She just let it fester, and worse, to the point where she ended up pulling off something so insane at our wedding just to ruin it. And he said the same thing that I had been thinking about as well, that even if Vicky hadn't cheated on him, and they had just broken up for some other reason, it still wouldn't have been any of her business. She still shouldn't have given me such a hard time and tried to humiliate me publicly like that. There was just no excuse for it, and she was honestly just trying to manipulate me. And he also told me that he respected whatever my parents were trying to do, because they were good people, and they probably had my best interests at heart. But then again, they are from a different generation, and I don't have to live by what they say. And I completely agree with that, so speaking to him brought a lot of clarity, and I don't feel that confused about this situation anymore. Update 2. Hi. So a couple of days ago, I had spoken to my husband about what I had been feeling, and after discussing everything, I decided to block all the numbers that my mother-in-law had been trying to contact me from. And I also decided that if after this, she still tries to get in touch with me, I'm gonna keep blocking her and just ignoring her in general. I also made up my mind that I was going to speak to my parents about this, because they were the ones who had tried to get me to her, and I really respected them, which is why I wanted to be upfront with them and talk to them about my feelings. It's been a couple of days since my last update, and this evening, I visited them. In the past few days, I had just been thinking about what to do regarding this situation with Tina, so I hadn't been in touch with them on a regular basis like I used to. Besides, I was feeling very awkward because I knew for a fact that if I tried to talk to them, they were going to bring up the situation with Tina and ask me what I intended to do about that. So I was kind of trying to avoid them a bit, but then, there is no getting around it. And today, when we got to talking, after some small talk, they obviously asked me what I had decided to do with the situation regarding Tina. And I told them that I was not going to do anything. I did not owe her anything. She had messed all her relationships up on her own. I was not responsible for any of that. Plus, she had always treated me disrespectfully, so I was not going to be her doormat and try to fix her relationship with her family after all that. I told them that I really respected the fact that they had tried to get me to see her point of view as well, and I had tried, but honestly, I didn't feel that empathetic towards her. Which is why I decided to stay away from her and the situation altogether. If my husband and his father wanted to speak to her and fix things with her, they could do so, but they would have to do it by themselves. I was not going to encourage or nudge them in any direction for Tina's sake, and I was quite firm about it. I thought that I would have to talk to them about my reasons as well and explain everything that I had spoken about in my last post, but, thankfully, they were quite respectful of my decision. My parents and I have always had a very open and healthy relationship, so they put their point across, and so did I. After I spoke to them about this, they told me that they do see my point, and that's where we ended it. Unlike a lot of people in the comments, my parents were obviously not trying to get me to apologize to her against my will, just to maintain the peace of the family. Anyway, now that that's done, I can finally leave for my honeymoon in a couple of days without any of this weighing on me. Update 3. Hello. So it's been 5 weeks since my last post, and a couple of days ago, I finally returned from my honeymoon. While we were away, my husband and I made it very clear to everyone that we did not want to be a part of any sort of drama. We didn't mention any names to anybody in the family, but we were obviously referring to Tina, or even worse, Vicky. That message was mainly just for my parents and my father-in-law, because the only people most likely to be contacted by these two. But my parents and my father-in-law also made sure that the rest of the family adhered to the instructions as well, and I'm really grateful for that, because while we were gone, Tina stirred up quite a storm. Because she had realized that I had stopped responding and she had no other way to contact her son or husband, she started showing up at my parents' house, and when they refused to entertain her, She started visiting everybody else in the family and started telling them that I was the reason her son and husband were not speaking to her anymore and that she desperately needed them to help her out and make them see how I was telling their family apart. She basically wanted everybody in the family to start trying to contact us so she would get an opportunity to speak to Nick, but the rest of the family was not stupid enough to fall for that, and everyone spoke up about it to my father-in-law. He got even more upset than he already was, and a couple of days later, when we came back, he finally told us that he had spoken to a lawyer and was filing for a divorce because he was done with Tina once and for all. He has already communicated her decision to her and she's obviously not happy about it, but she is still deciding to take out her anger on me, for some reason. She and Vicky have been sending emails and messages to everyone, telling them that the reason that Nick had broken up with her was because he had been emotionally involved with me and the cheating was just some story that we had cooked up to make him seem like a saint. And now, we were tricking everyone into believing that just so that nobody would judge us, and they would become the so-called villains. I mean, I don't even understand what they're trying to do at this point. They're pretty much just grasping at straws. Vicky is desperate to be accepted back into her family since after her parents found out that she and her cheating was the reason that they had lost their lifelong friends, they cut her off too. Obviously, Tina is going through pretty much the same thing. She wants her son and husband to accept her back into the family as well, but thanks to their own behavior, I don't see that happening. Anyway, I don't care about any of that. I'm just happy that Nick and I don't have anything to do with dinner anymore, and I'm really happy that I didn't try to fix things for her because I'm pretty sure it would have backfired. Whatever, I'm happy, so is Nick, and I'm pretty sure that after the divorce, my father-in-law will be better off as well.